morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to meet you all and to welcome to this wonderful panel on regulation, building innovation, market trends, and let's see what it brings. Let's welcome our panelists here. We have Domenico Scaffidi, a standard advisory panel member at the Bank of England. Domenico brings us the... Yes, thank you. Domenico brings us the regulatory and systemic perspective. He knows exactly what keeps central bankers awake at night. We have Ilia Dragan, Chief Product Officer at SaltEdge. Ilia is at the forefront of open banking innovation, turning regulation like PSD2 into a real market. Pavel Shust, Senior International Advisor for Digital Financial Services at IFC. Hello, Pavel. Pavel has a global lens, looking at how Fintech can promote inclusion, especially in markets where financial services are still catching up. And finally, Raluca Micu, Deputy General Manager at Talking Financial Technologies Romania. Worth mentioning, Raluca brings an experience of more than 15 years at National Bank of Romania, including as Head of Oversight. She and her team greatly contributed that Moldova adhered to SEPA, and now with her support and very valuable support, Moldova is now part of SEPA. I'm Nicolina, a lawyer working closely with fintechs and financial institutions and also with investors. This makes me to be in the middle of regulation and innovation, and sometimes I'm the translator, sometimes I'm the referee. So I'd like to ask you for one more round of applause, and let's dive in. So the first question will go with the general one. Fintech and regulation are not always the closest allies. Yet regulation is very important for customer trust and for safeguarding the financial stability. At the same time, innovation often moves at a pace faster than the rules can adapt. And now comes the question. How can Moldova create an environment that encourages innovation while protecting consumers and maintaining financial stability? And I think I'll give the floor to Ilia.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody here. So, and the question was, you made a couple of statements.
Yeah, the question is how Moldova can create an environment that encourages innovation on one hand and protect consumers and maintain financial stability on the other hand.
Unfortunately, Moldova is not like the top country on the market, which gives us a lot of opportunities. So we can always, I believe the best approach is always to look up what happened in other countries, other regulations. By countries, I mean like as well economical areas like European Union, and see what kind of regulatory decisions brought to the point where the market started to grow, and what kind of those decisions actually made it, and try to adopt them and implement, taking the use cases. So inventing something new on the global markets is quite difficult, and within the capacity Moldova has, it would be very challenging. But looking up on the insights globally on the market, I believe is the most graceful way to go. Moreover, I highly trust the national common authorities and highly trust that there might be some communication between them, even outside of Europe, where, I mean, European Economic Area, which means like always our national common authority can discuss and talk with others to get the insights from hands to hands.
Thank you very much. That's very useful. And I'll take the chance to ask Raluca on this topic, what's her perspective, giving the overall experience with also the central bank and the market experience that you have.
I think actually in what we have seen, let's say the last 10 years, because it's the most relevant period to look at, I think it's to ensure the balance between regulation and innovation. I think this is the most important one, because of course you need innovation, you need a central bank to be a catalyst in order to support innovation, to promote technologies to encourage the market to be innovative, but on the other part, you need also to ensure security. It's trust of the people in the financial system. So that's why it's important when you are adopting, for sure, regulation is needed, but also to be able to ensure this balance between the regulated environment and also between innovation. This was the most challenging part in our activity in the Central Bank of Romania in my previous time, so that's why. And also right now, bringing a little bit of flavor, let's say, from the other side, on the private sector, I can confirm that it's really important to have regulation. So you have trust. If you are acting in a regulated environment, you have support, you have actually authorities confirming that it's the right way you are going. This is important, but of course you need also dialogue, you need support, you need strong support to be innovative. Without that, it's not possible. I mean, collaboration and discussion between all parties is also important for the other side, for the private sector.
Thank you very much. That's very useful. And considering that you mentioned the role of the regulator and the dialogue, let's zoom out a bit. And we would like to know what are the experiences of other countries and what lessons can Moldova learn from other markets, for instance, UK or other markets that you know well. Domenico?
So first of all, good morning to everyone. I know this is a long day. So it's an interesting question. My advice, thinking about the UK environment, but also the new payment architecture where we are deeply involved as a Bank of England, is don't make the mistakes that we made. So it means collaboration. There is no need to reinvent the wheel, so using what has been already created, like Raluca mentioned, in terms of the regulation, because finally you need an inclusion of the regulation to allow any kind of trust that you want to build. If you think, I love sportive cars, I'll give you an example. I think that you know Ferruccio Lamborghini, so the Lamborghini sportive car. When he knocked at the door at Ferrari, and it is because he knows that Ferrari is a beautiful car, but there was something that he was missing in the car. So finally, Ferrari sent back Ferruccio Lamborghini and said, you're a farmer, you just build tractors. So he built the Lamborghini. Personally, not in love with the Lamborghini, but it's a car that can compete with the Ferrari. So why this example? Because I think that Moldova is exactly in the same position, but with the advantage that knocking at the door, there is no one that is sending you back. But in the reality, thinking about the G20 directive and cross-border payments, there will be always a great, let's say, effort to collaborate. So finally, this one is the example, my advice. So use what we already did, and we are here to advise from our mistake.
That's interesting indeed. And Pavel, considering that you have this global lens on the markets, on different markets, what will be your perspective on this one?
Yep. Thank you for the question. I would say two things. First, there is a fine line between copying and alignment. As I see, we are often asked, what are other countries' experiences? How do they regulate this? Right? But from my experience, the most successful countries and the most successful markets, those are not who are copying something, but those who find their own way. I'll give you a couple of them, but I will not name any particular countries. Those countries could just copy others' regulation. They're usually not successful because Moldova will never be Singapore and the UK will never be Moldova. Those are very different jurisdictions. You cannot just copy there just seamlessly. And second thing, which I think is always important, but I think it's overlooked during our conversations at the conferences, the British call it the revolving door situation. When people from the private sector eventually work at the national bank and vice versa. People from the national bank work at the private sector. I'll give you one example what we had in Central Asia. I had a very good colleague at the national bank, and we were arguing a lot about agent banking maybe 7 years ago, and we were pushing him to adopt regulations, etc. And then he went to the private sector, And then he calls me and says, Pavel, who wrote those regulations on agent banking? Oh, you wrote it. So I think it's very important when we have this revolving door situation that people actually look from different sides of the coin.
Yes, indeed, that's very useful. And sometimes we see in practice that people are changing seats. And when they come from the regulator on the private side, they have more ideas than they were in the first position. So coming from this statement, regulators can be innovators. And regulators are often seen as struggling to catch up with fintechs. But in reality, they can innovate too. So how can regulators leverage technology like RegTech or SubTech to keep up with fast-moving technology and with fintechs? What are the examples, perhaps, that you may know on this one and you can share?
Me? No?
Any of you. It's open to all panelists.
Okay, if you don't mind. UK is a good example. I believe the UK market, where we can be influenced, where UK is not sticking to any kind of open banking regulation, they are innovatively updating it. For example, they, on demand, required CMA9 banks to support sweeping via variable recurring payments via the APIs. There's nobody else in the world yet doing this. And the whole account-to-account payments with open banking above it is not covering the whole use case, the payments market, all possible use cases. This is a perfect example where the regulation is actually super innovative and driving it. And besides that, there are several multiple other examples where the public discussion is still running with the with Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, and we first of all have the fully transparently, the whole market transparently knows where it can go and where most likely it cannot go, and it is driving. I believe this is a perfect example, and other NCAs can influence upon those actions.
Okay, and Domenico, since it was mentioned, UK, I have to give the floor to you as well.
Yes, of course. No, I mean, I agree with my colleague, and I mean, I also get your point when you were saying that, of course, we are Moldova is not UK, is not Singapore. But when we say that we should think about a strong infrastructure of the regulation, of course, I mean, think that the PSD2 has been an inclusion in 26 countries with the 26 different jurisdictions. It doesn't mean that exactly the same. Totally different regions, politically, economically speaking, and everything, in terms of immigrants and the use cases. But when we say that the UK experience is like that, because I think that there are 61 UK banks and 645 foreign financial institutions with their own jurisdiction, their own business, their own use cases. So I think that could be something that can be achieved easily.
Okay, thank you. And since you mentioned PSD2, there's an always open question or topic about open banking. Everybody's already accustomed to that. Everybody knows what open banking is. It's been in discussion on Moldova's agenda since 2019. We have a regulation in place. Banks are already technically prepared, but in practice, adoption is slow. What is holding back? Raluca, I'll dare to ask you.
I think that banks are technically prepared. It's a strong statement. Just saying, because we have seen this in the Romanian market, and not only in the Romanian market, also in UK. And also I had this huge opportunity to work with the colleagues from National Bank of Moldova to implement PSD2 also regarding the open banking, and also to share a lot of what we have learned, I mean, our lesson in the transposition time. I think, first of all, technically they are not ready, because to be technically ready, most probably they are understanding to be compliant. To be compliant, it's one, and actually to ensure a user experience and to understand the open banking concept is totally different. What we have seen is that this is keeping the adoption to be slow, because actually you don't have an open banking system. they have built an open banking system that is closed. So it's not working, or it's with a lot of additional intervention from the client, so it's not the same. That's why it's not used, one. Or with another, some information discouraging usually, but in the sense to protect themselves, because we totally understood it was for the first time when banks had to actually share their clients' data with a third party. This was a huge change, actually. And we need time, actually, they needed time in order to adapt. Also regulators, also banks, and to understand not only from the compliance point of view what open banking was supposed to be, but also from the business point of view. Because usually when you have regulation, you have also business perspective there. But nobody is looking. Everybody is looking to be compliant because you have a lot of compliance rules and you need to check all the boxes, and that's it, full stop. But the business is more important for that part, because being compliant and also ensuring or actually open the market for the business opportunity, it should be in the same time. So the mindset was not necessarily wrong, but a little bit not adapted to what open banking was supposed to bring. And for us, for example, we also not only in Romania, but also in a lot of countries in the EU, this was the big problems. If you are looking, you have PSD2, you have a lot of, we were calling them satellite regulation in order to explain or to translate and to bring more clarity on the provisions in PSD2, and you have a lot of opinions from the EBA. Why? Because it was needed to clarify. It was a very technical regulation, and nobody translated what does it mean in practice. In our case, the big problem was that some banks had also to change the APIs. So rebuild everything from scratch. This is a huge effort, and is something that nobody wants actually in the end. Not the regulators, not the banks, not the TPPs. So nobody wants to go back and to rebuild everything. But in some cases, it might be needed. This is the biggest problem, and actually I think the adoption comes slow also from this perspective, and you need to build trust in the ecosystem in order to understand what is open banking, because you have security there. For example, it was someone was saying that you need to double check if the client gave the consent. You don't need, because the authorization, the authentication, everything is done in the environment of the bank. So it's the same like I'm actually assessing the environment to do the payments or to see my account. So it's not additional verification needed there. So these small things are important for the market to understand. So I said that Moldova should do more workshops, more trainings, more discussions about what is there, and also what is the value of open banking for the stakeholders.
Thank you, Raluca. That's useful. And I'll dare to ask also Ilia on this, since Ilia and Soltech, they're on the front of open banking. So, Ilia, if I can ask you very shortly, because we know you have a lot to say about it.
Very shortly, because the regulation is written not good. First of all, it applies the same rules for all the market participants. Is it a tier 1 bank, a super big global bank, and a small electronic money institution? We have the same rules. This is a no-go. This as well creates additional obstacles for new, smaller banks to appear on the market, because now they run additional expense. Nobody going to use their open banking channel, whatever, because they're only on the starter position. Their target audience is very small. Change the rules, don't make the same rules equal for billion-based banks with billion assets versus small electronic money institutions, small banks. This is the first thing. Secondly, the user interface is bad because it's completely not regulated. Take a look at Saudi Arabia. They actually put into the regulation how the redirection of the user should work and how the user journey should look like from the perspective of authorizing the consent. It's very simple. Just change the regulation. I don't think that we have on the left hand the regulation, on the right hand the innovation. I believe they actually stick together, but sometimes the national competent authorities forget what they have to do. It's not about restricting, it's about moving the market forward. I try to be short.
Yeah, that was good. And that's very useful. I think we can make some notes here. And but I also like to ask about the international and regionally scenarios and use cases for implementing secure and scalable open banking.
Is it for me?
I think so, yes.
Well, first of all, I think there is a lot of over-expectations from the very beginning about open banking. So we expected something from it that it was not designed to deliver. And secondly, this is the case, and I do agree that there is possibly a gap between regulation and practice. But I think when PSD2 was written, and it was subsequently copied in other jurisdictions as well, it was based in Brussels on very specific philosophical considerations about de-verticalization of the financial industry. But no one cared to explain. Everyone was talking about API and exchange of information, etc., and then we started copying it from one region to another. And unfortunately, in many jurisdictions, this is just, very unsuccessful, because again, this is just copying without actually self-understanding why are we doing it. And secondly, about bad experiences, regionally, I think in the Balkans as well, and Moldova is not, here is not an exception, your markets are in the state of the perfect storm, because compared to the European banks who faced PSD2 back then, now you need to get to SEPA, implement electronic KYC, PSD2, DORA implementation, how many people you need in the banks. And of course, in this situation, of course, they just go for tick box approach because they don't have a lot of budget, they don't have time to think about new products and services, because we are bombarding them with new regulation again and again and again. And again, I agree with you about the differentiation between, but I think it also needs to be time-wise differentiation, meaning that we need to schedule implementation of different reforms to ensure that people can actually implement those. I can give you a couple of examples when implementation of open banking was just legally postponed because no one was ready. So what is the purpose of regulation when no one can comply with it? So this is, I think, the most important lessons that we learned from here, from the Balkans and from other regions.
Thank you very much. It's interesting how we close up with what we started. So this panel is very interesting so far, I think. So moving on with the next topic, which is a very hot topic right now, it's SEPA. It's SEPA because on October 6th, most Moldovan banks are joining SEPA credit transfer and direct debit scheme. This is a major step in aligning Moldova financial system with the European one. It also puts Moldova in an interesting position. It's technically connected, but still outside of the EU framework. So here comes the question. How significant is this step for Moldova's integration into European financial ecosystem? And I'd like to ask Raluca on this, since I've mentioned that Raluca played a key role in the file for submission and preparation.
So yeah, it was. I think it is a really important milestone to finalize this process and to be part of SEPA. This is for sure. Of course, I remember in 2012 when in Romania we had to implement SEPA regulation. It took us 2 years. Even though we were actually in the EU, even though we had the rules, the rule book and everything from the European Payment Council, it took us around 18 months to implement and for banks technically to be ready to process SEPA payments. And also we had the advantage that a lot of banks, actually majority of the banks, were coming from financial groups already. In the EU already with SEPA rules implemented and knowledge to share with the Romanian banks. So the effort is huge. It's not simple. We were discussing with the colleagues during the technical assistant project that the difficult part is coming right now. So the first step was done to prepare the framework to be accepted according to the criteria to be part of SEPA zone, but the most difficult part is coming right now. You need to adapt your infrastructure, you need to explain to your customer what SEPA means, what is changing, what is the added value of being SEPA. It will take, in my opinion, at least 1 to 2 years. So it's not easy, it's not done. It's a long process. You need all the players, the stakeholders, the public authorities, the central bank, everyone to put an effort for this to be ready. Otherwise, it will not be. And I think also the biggest challenge is that don't forget that even though you are not an EU country, being SEPA, you have the obligation to actually update your regulatory framework according to SEPA. So IML, payment services, everything. So this is an effort that it has to be done constantly, and I think until now, actually, Moldova didn't face this one because it was not in the EU.
Yes, yes, this is indeed, and it answers the question that what would be the impact, first of all, on the financial institutions. But now, Domenico, from the UK perspective, what lessons can Moldova learn from a country that is outside the EU now, but still in SEPA?
I think that Raluca already replied, he already answered. It is true. So, and it's also interesting because I still have my UK account for my all the time, previous time at the European Central Bank. So I still sending money outside UK, but there is also another peculiarity, that is the currency that is different. So the FX, that's something that has been agreed at the country level every 20 seconds. And literally using your app, you see that if you don't confirm in 20 seconds, there is a slight change in the exchange. That is great. But the point is exactly what Raluca was saying before. So because the UK banks are SEPA, and there is also a local regulation, the local regulation must be implemented with everything is happening with the SEPA. So it's a double work. It requires a huge effort. And of course, so despite the Brexit, of course there is a commission, we are also involved, that is working with the European Union, with the European Payment Council, in order to be sure that any version of the rule book that is coming into force will be introduced, of course, in the UK. And of course it's not easy, but it's the way it's working. Now we are familiar. Of course the PSD3, for instance, is not going to be totally different from what we already do in the UK, if you think about DORA or other, let's say, regulation related to fraud, security on the data side. But still, we need to be aligned. Otherwise, it creates big problems on the country, but mainly on the financial institutions that they need to be compliant with both regulations.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're moving on to virtual assets, because this is again a topic that's very interesting among professionals. Virtual assets is an area where Moldova hasn't really developed yet. In many ways, we're starting from the scratch. At the same time, it is feel inevitable that this market will emerge here soon. So the EU has already moved towards it. It approved MiCA. It's setting the first comprehensive framework on this one. So what lessons can Moldova learn from other countries with MiCA experience? And what would be the key suggestion for a country like ours, who is starting from the scratch and who is just building the baseline for it? And I ask Pavel on it, if you can share your experience.
Yeah, of course. I remember first conferences on virtual assets many years ago, when most of the audience were in sweaters, in jeans, and I was the only one in tie. Now everything is different. That's so sad. First lesson is that don't try to eat the elephant whole, because virtual assets are very different and it's very difficult to differentiate. MiCA is all about everything and not about some things as well. So just transposing MiCA and adopting MiCA is not enough. And there is a list of different services which are related to virtual assets. Some of them are relevant, some of them are not. So just differentiate what you really need for the jurisdiction and differentiate something that you don't need. Another question that we are being asked in many regions is what is the role of banks? Because banks are much interested in getting into the virtual assets platforms and activities as well. And I think this is a very fine line in how to protect the traditional banking market against the risks which are inherent, but also not creating the parallel market for virtual assets and traditional fiat currencies as well. But, in the end, whether you do anything or you don't do anything, this will happen. I mean, the virtual assets will be there. I got the email from one of the central banks outside this region, and they were asking, we are thinking about virtual assets regulation, we are thinking about prohibiting P2P transactions, how we do it. The answer is, you can't do it. Or you can do it, but adopting regulation banning it doesn't mean that it will be banned. So there should not be a gap between practice and regulation currently, because I'm sure you already have the market, although it's not visible for the regulators, but it will be.
Yes, thank you. And that's useful to know that it's acknowledged that we have the market and regulations need to follow. Raluca, any thoughts on this one from your perspective?
No, I totally agree with Pavel on what he said, actually. So you need to understand what are the needs, what are the gaps in your market, what are the services here, and what you need to regulate. This is the first step. The second step, and what I know that it was a big challenge, is actually for the competent authority to have the capacity to enforce MiCA and to understand MiCA, because MiCA is a totally different animal. So sorry for the word, but it's pure technology there. So regulator, supervisor, actually we had different, we have actually different skills. MiCA, you need other skills. You need new one to understand technology, to understand what is there. Otherwise, it's not like you are going to do supervision in the traditional mode for the banks, like you are doing for the financial services. So it will be a huge challenge for the competent authority actually to be able to have the capacity to understand and to supervise. This is also seen in Romania, but also in the EU.
Thanks, Raluca. So we've discussed innovation, EU alignment, and specific cases like open banking and MiCA, and of course we discussed CEPA. Let's wrap up and zoom it out a bit. Let's see where Moldova stands as a digital financial ecosystem. Moldova is still building its digital finance ecosystem, and you all bring very valuable insights and experiences and perspectives. Where do you think Moldova stands compared to other markets, and that you know well? And if you can just, all of you, share a few thoughts on this one. You can start. So
I think actually in the last 4 years, Moldova has done really great steps. MIA, for example, account-to-account and instant payments are good examples on that. But nevertheless, it's still a lot of work to do. Also, I think Romania and Moldova have some common points, yeah? For example, financial inclusion. Also in Romania, even though we have actually increased the financial inclusion rate in the last years, I think still it's a problem between rural, small urban and big urban. I think Moldova is going to face the same if you are going to look from the geographical distribution point of view. Of course, if you are going to look in Chișinău, a lot of good things are here. But when we are discussing about what you have to do as a country, you have to actually financially and socially include everyone. So for this you need a strategy, for this you need everyone to be engaged and to work for this objective. This will be the most important part, to do more on that, to financially include SMEs in order to promote financial banking. I think SMEs are the most important part of the chain in promoting, for example, branchless banking, yeah? Because you are not going to be there, I mean, with a branch. You are not going to be there with another, I don't know, payment service provider to be physically. So you need to have the infrastructure. For example, I'm really happy what we are doing in Token. It's to build infrastructure and to promote the traditional point of sale, the POS, like a financial hub. Yeah, to be able to offer access for SMEs to different financial services, but also for the end user, because with that financial hub, you have actually access to payments, but also to cash. So this is the most important part, to understand what you have to do in order to financially and socially include everyone.
thanks, Raluca. So inclusion is the word, Ilia?
Well, I believe we still have a lot of opportunities, even some of those have been already lost. Why? Because we are small, regulatory isolated countries, meaning that our national common authority can to a big degree do what they want. We are not like Romania, because Romania is a part, like NC in Romania is reporting to European Banking Authority, and all this chain is much more complicated. As said, MIA was a great solution, has to be updated. It has some cons, it has to be improved. There is no clarification on the limits in MIA for the peer-to-peer transaction. Everybody's using it. But even within the family you cannot transfer money. There are limits, sorry. Binding one IBAN to one phone number makes nonsense. Why not having a list, like I have one IBAN per bank, and when I'm making transfer per phone number, then I can select which bank to transfer to. Very simple, but very asked improvement. As on the previous topic, what Moldova can do, rarely you can find a student or even somebody under 30 who is not using or knowing what digital assets are, who is not using crypto. But there's no regulation here on that. So what we are doing actually, we are saying to the younger population, please go use the services of the companies outside of Moldova regulated by other countries. Why? Why not sticking them to our services? Why not sticking them to the companies actually based in Moldova, regulated in Moldova, and used in Moldova? We are losing so many opportunities because sometimes we are afraid, sometimes we are not sure, sometimes we maybe not fully understand how it's working. So there's still a lot of opportunities for us, and it's really up to our national common authority to move those faster forward.
Thanks, Ilia. So we are moving to balance, and when we discuss about balance, we discuss about central banks. So, Domenico, please share your thoughts.
I mean, I'd like to be pragmatic, but also coming back to the original question, and I totally agree with what you were saying about being afraid to use the regional. Finally, why we are talking so much about regulation, everything is happening? For one single reason, because we want to offer a better experience to our clients, our customers, so building trust, and being able to send and receive money at the same level of service that, of course, maybe the big banks are offering. But according to also what you said before, I can't agree more. Because of the lack of the budget, because of the resources, and many other reasons, not everyone is able to offer the same level of service. So in other words, if you think about what Raluca mentioned about Romania, so Token, why Token? Because they are building a service that is going to be available for all countries, but now they are expanding in Europe. And according to what you said, so in the end, what we are saying is relying in organization, fintechs, that can offer a service on your behalf. Because this one is a game that is working only if all stakeholders, all partners are at the same level of integration. So in other words, my account is in a tier 1 bank that we have a huge budget, but I'm sending money to my friend that opened an account in a very small rural bank. Of course, it doesn't have the same knowledge, the same resources to do the same. So the only things to be at the same level is relying in partners, regional partners or international partners, but still that can help to have the same level of integration. This one is a success of the country, and I think that is a lesson that we should consider. So, sorry for using your words, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid and think about the country as the same resources, the same knowledge to be at the same level of the others, collaborating.
Thanks. And since we are discussing about collaboration, Pavel, what do you think?
Thank you for the question. I mean, academically speaking, there are independent variables, independent variables. First, you cannot change geography, you cannot change the global environment or regional environment, right? You are where you are. But there are dependent variables, and you have lots of different things which are already parts of the recipe. It's non-payment system, open banking, regulator, electronic KYC, and many other things. Electronic government, one of the best, frankly, in the world. And more importantly, you have people with great work ethics and with understanding that competition is important, nothing is a given, and even from the comments today from the stage, you see that we need to do something more and more and more. In other situations and in many other markets, there is no this drive. I mean, everything is given in stone, there are traditional banks and that's it, you don't have to do anything. What can be improved, and this is not for Moldova, this is for all the countries where we work with. And I don't want to sound like a person from LinkedIn post, but you need to cooperate between cooperation between regulators and the private sector. And by this cooperation, I mean you need to learn how to listen to each other. Sometimes we try to listen, we exchange the emails and our regulatory drafts, etc., but we are not explaining why we are doing this or that. And maybe this is traditional, maybe this is cultural, I have no idea. But sometimes we consider us from different part of the fence and we are not listening to each other. Although, frankly, we are all human and we all speak the same language. So if we listen to each other and we actually explain what we are doing, that would be much, much simpler.
Totally agree. So in the end, the goal is the same for everybody, just to be safe and to have a trustworthy market. So since we are closing, almost closing the panel, we have a final question, a lightning one. I'd like each of you to leave us one closing thought. If you'd had to leave this panel, we'll now go to the next speaker, but let's leave this panel with one idea that you'd like to be left with each of us.
For Moldova, meaning, yeah, yeah. I still focus on enhanced digital payment system and branchless banking. I think this is something that will bring you actually 10 years in the future.
Thank you, Raluca.
Elaborate a vision which is transparently shared across the market participants. Where we are going to, what is upcoming next, and most important, as you said, why? Why we are moving in that direction. We can always elaborate a super liberal regulation, see how it is going on, and then make it stricter in case we see something is not going in the right way, like Latvia did, with issuing a lot of licenses. So we need a shared vision for the market participants.
Thanks.
So I'm a sailor. Anytime I sail, my partner sailing is the compass. The compass is keeping me in the same direction, the right direction. So my advice is think that you have a compass and that your target is the customer experience. Never lose that one, because it's the one that is giving you even the fresh revenues, because finally we are working to get revenues, but making the clients happy. Because if we build all this infrastructure that finally no one is going to use, is a loss. So please consider always the customer experience and what really your clients need.
Thank you, Domenico.
Yeah, well, it's a complicated question, just one thing. You know, as humans and as panelists as well, we are psychologically trying to share our problems and talk about problems, but I would want to be optimistic. Don't lose faith. Everything is going to be all right, 100%. Just work hard and everything work out at the end.
Thanks, Pavel. I just made some notes just for the final touch. So we have regulation and inclusion, we have vision, we have market expectation, we have the question why, and we need to answer to that question. We have the direction, we have the compass, we need the compass to know where to go next. We need customer experience and we need happy customers. And we have the faith that everything will be all right. Thank you very much to all.